What's the most important aspect of this night for you, and why is it special for Marvin Hagler?
Well, I'm speechless, man. I really don't know what to say, but I'm very happy to be here and to be honored with this great gift tonight, and it shows my legacy, and I believe that all great champions that are legend, it's great to be able to see your legend while you're still alive.
Even the greatest champions know fear. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, the man who ruled the middleweight division with an iron fist for 7 years, was no exception. But who were the 5 men Hagler himself admitted he feared? One of them nearly ended his career with a single punch. Another made him question if his best weapons were enough, and about the sport he loved. Marvin Hagler was not like other champions. While most fighters celebrated their success, Hagler isolated himself on the windswept beaches of Provincetown, Massachusetts. He called these training camps his self-imposed prisons. He understood something most people never grasp. It gets tough to wake up at 5 in the morning for road work when you have been sleeping in silk pajamas. Success breeds comfort. Comfort breeds weakness. And weakness gets you knocked out. But Hagler had a secret weapon that kept him sharp. Fear. Not the kind that paralyzes you, but the kind that sharpens your focus. Professional fear. He knew that when a man steps into the ring, he is going to war. He admitted that knocking men out could be a very scary situation. This fear was not weakness. It was wisdom. And 5 fighters brought that fear to the surface more than any others. If you grew up watching Hagler fight, drop a comment and tell me which opponent you remember most. Did you see any of these legendary battles live? Let me know below. The first man to truly scare Hagler was Vito Antuofermo. Before Hagler became the undisputed king, he was just another contender, fighting for respect in the tough gyms of Philadelphia and Boston. Nobody wanted to fight him. The champions avoided him. The promoters ignored him. But on November 30th, 1979, Hagler finally got his shot. He challenged Vito Antuofermo for the middleweight championship of the world. Antuofermo was not a skilled boxer. Sports writers called his style neo-caveman. He used his head as a battering ram. He walked through punches like they were raindrops. And he turned every boxing match into a brutal street fight. This created a nightmare for Hagler. What do you do when your best punches cannot stop a man? What happens when violence itself fails? The fight at Caesar's Palace was chaos. Hagler landed clean combinations. He outboxed Antuofermo. He controlled the action, but Antuofermo just kept coming forward. His face turned into a bloody mess. He suffered 6 cuts that needed 25 stitches, yet he never stopped pressing. In his corner, his cutman Freddie Brown told him to win it in the last round. Antuofermo fought like his life depended on it. When the scorecards were read, Hagler could not believe what he heard. Judge Dalby Shirley scored it 142 to 144 for Antuofermo. Judge Dwayne Ford scored it 145 to 141 for Hagler. And Judge Hal Miller scored it 143 to 143, a draw. The fight was ruled a draw. Antuofermo kept his title. Hagler got nothing. This was the unkindest cut of all. Hagler believed he had done enough to win. He believed he had earned the championship. But the judges saw it differently. In that moment, Hagler learned a terrifying lesson. The judges could not be trusted. Leaving a fight in their hands was gambling with your career. From that night forward, Hagler knew he had to change his approach. He could not just win rounds. He had to destroy his opponents. Hagler later grouped Antuofermo with British fighter Kevin Finnegan as the toughest men he ever fought. He often wondered how Antuofermo kept going. How does a man absorb that much punishment and still march forward? This resilience haunted Hagler. It showed him that his best weapons might not be enough. The fear of the unmovable object became real. But Antuofermo taught Hagler something valuable. Boxing is not just about skill. It is about will. And when will meets injustice, something has to break. Hagler decided it would be his opponents, not his spirit. He adopted a new philosophy. The only difference between street fighting and boxing is a referee stopping you from killing someone. Hagler would never leave another fight to the judges. He would finish what he started. When Hagler finally got his rematch with Antuofermo in 1981, he did not try to outbox him. He butchered him. The technical knockout victory was brutal and complete. Hagler had learned his lesson. Never trust the system. Only trust your fists. This became the foundation of everything that followed. Every training session in the cold. Every lonely run on the beach. Every brutal sparring round. All of it was preparation for a single truth. If you want something in this world, you cannot wait for someone to give it to you. You have to take it. The second fighter who made Hagler feel real fear was Roberto Duran. By November 1983, Duran was already a legend. He was known as Manos de Piedra, Hands of Stone. He had resurrected his career after the infamous No Mas fight against Sugar Ray Leonard. Now he was moving up to middleweight to challenge Hagler. Everyone expected a war, but Hagler feared something different. He did not fear Duran's power, he feared his brain. Hagler recognized that Duran was smart, maybe the smartest fighter in the ring. Duran was not just a brawler, he was a master tactician who set traps and countered perfectly. Hagler admitted that you do not barrel into a guy like Roberto Duran. Why take unnecessary punishment unless you have to? This caution came from a deeper fear. The fear of embarrassment, the fear of being the bigger, stronger champion, made to look foolish by a smaller, smarter veteran. The fight did not meet expectations of violence. Instead, the world watched a chess match. Duran used defensive skills that seemed impossible. He slipped punches by millimeters. He countered with precision. Hagler, usually the aggressor, found himself hesitating. He worried about Duran's right-hand counter every time he threw his jab. Duran later taunted Hagler. He said the champion got scared and became a coward after feeling Duran's power and skill. While this was typical Duran trash talk, it touched on truth. Hagler fought with extreme caution, and the scorecards after 13 rounds proved his anxiety was justified. Hagler was actually losing the fight on 2 of the 3 cards. One judge had Duran ahead by 1 point, another judge had Duran ahead by 1 point. The third card was even. Think about that. The undisputed middleweight champion was 6 minutes away from losing his title to a former lightweight. This was Hagler's nightmare coming true. His physical advantages meant nothing against Duran's ring intelligence. The fear of being outsmarted forced Hagler to abandon his caution. In rounds 14 and 15, Hagler finally unleashed his full power. Recognizing his title was slipping away, he imposed his size and strength. He dominated the final 6 minutes. The judges gave him the unanimous decision, but the final scores showed how close it was. The margins were 146 to 145, 144 to 143, and 142 to 141. These razor-thin scores reflected the supreme difficulty of the fight. After the fight, Hagler's relief was obvious. He acknowledged that it was hard to hit Duran with a solid punch. He called Duran a crafty guy. This fight remains the only time Hagler successfully defended his title by decision rather than knockout. Duran did not threaten Hagler's health. He threatened his professional identity. The fear of being outsmarted forced Hagler to dig deeper than ever before. It showed that being the strongest and toughest is not always enough. Sometimes you need to outthink your opponent too. But if Duran represented the threat of the mind, Thomas Hearns represented the threat of immediate death. Standing 6 feet 1 inch tall with a skeletal frame, Hearns generated power that seemed impossible. He was the premier knockout artist of his generation. His right hand had knocked out Roberto Duran in 2 rounds. Hagler had failed to do that in 15. The build-up to their April 15, 1985 clash was filled with genuine hatred. Hagler wore a baseball cap with the word EW Air during the promotion. He knew a boxing match was impossible. He could not outfence the taller, longer Hearns. To win, he had to walk through danger itself. The first round of Hagler versus Hearns is celebrated as the greatest round in boxing history. But from Hagler's perspective, it was pure panic. He stormed out of his corner, not with calculated aggression, but with frantic rage. He needed to overwhelm Hearns before the hitman could find his range. The statistics from that round are incredible. Hagler landed 28.4 punches, 67% more than the middleweight average. He landed 19.5 power punches, 95% more than average. His connect percentage was 43.2%, over 13 points higher than normal. His plus-minus rating was 12.1, which is elite level. But despite this explosion of violence, Hearns landed his trademark right-hand flush on Hagler's chin. Hagler was momentarily stunned. He later admitted that Hearns definitely tried to put the bomb on him. He acknowledged that Hearns could punch. This was the moment Hagler's fear became real. He realized he could be hurt. Instead of retreating, which would have let Hearns measure him for a finishing blow, Hagler leaned into danger. He engaged in a reckless exchange that broke Hearns' right hand and shattered his confidence. Then a new fear emerged. A gash opened on Hagler's forehead. His face became a mask of blood. The ringside doctor became the new threat. Hagler carried trauma from earlier fights. He knew officials stopped fights on cuts. When the referee paused the action in round 3 to have the doctor examine the wound, Hagler growled at him. He asked if he was missing Hearns. This was pure anxiety. Not fear of Hearns, but fear of a technical stoppage robbing him of his title. The doctor's approval to continue acted like fuel. Hagler realized he was on borrowed time. He launched a final assault that ended with Hearns being carried back to his corner. The victory was Hagler's masterpiece, but it was painted with fear of the right hand, fear of the cut, fear of the stoppage. It validated his philosophy. Destruct and destroy was the only safety net available. By March 1986, the wars were catching up with Hagler. Then came John Mugabe. The beast from Kampala entered the ring with a perfect record of 25 wins and 0 losses. Every single victory came by knockout. He was in many ways a younger, fresher version of Hagler himself, a relentless pressure fighter with heavy hands and an iron chin. The fear Mugabe brought was different. It was the fear of father time. Hagler was approaching the end of his career. Mugabe represented the new generation coming to take the throne. The question was whether the aging champion could withstand the onslaught of a man who had never heard the final bell. The fight was brutal. It lacked the flash of the Hearns fight, but exceeded it in sustained damage. Mugabe did not fold under Hagler's pressure. He fired back. Observers noted steam rising from the champion's head in the cool Las Vegas night air. This showed the incredible effort Hagler had to make to keep the beast at bay. Hagler admitted he had to wear Mugabe down. This strategy required absorbing tremendous punishment to drain the challenger's reserves. Unlike the tactical puzzle of Duran or the sprint against Hearns, Mugabe forced Hagler into a marathon of pain. The victory came by knockout in round 11, but it came at a heavy price. Boxing historians cite the Mugabe fight as the bout that eroded the last of Hagler's prime. Sitting ringside that night was Sugar Ray Leonard. He was officially retired at the time. Leonard watched Hagler struggle with Mugabe's speed and volume. He turned to his companion, actor Michael J. Fox, and said he could beat Hagler. Hagler's fear of the younger lion was validated. While he survived the challenge, the effort required to beat Mugabe stripped away his aura. He destroyed the beast. But the beast took a piece of him that could never be replaced. The final threat came from Sugar Ray Leonard. For years, a fight between them had been discussed. It finally happened in 1987 after Leonard had been inactive for 3 years. Hagler's fear of Leonard was unique. It was not fear of physical destruction. It was fear of politics. Fear of the system manipulating the sport. Leonard was boxing's golden child, an Olympic hero, a media darling, a charismatic superstar. He stood in stark contrast to Hagler's menacing persona. Hagler had always felt persecuted by the boxing establishment. He feared that against Leonard, the playing field would not be level. He suspected Leonard would not fight a war. Instead, Leonard would exploit the scoring system to steal a decision. The fight proved Hagler's fears correct. Leonard used a tactic called shoe shining. He threw rapid, flashy combinations that landed on arms and gloves, but looked impressive. Hagler fought out of an orthodox stance, a tactical error that confused experts. He surrendered the early rounds, letting Leonard bank points. The punch statistics tell an interesting story. Hagler threw 792 total punches, while Leonard threw 629. Hagler was the aggressor, but Leonard landed 306 punches, while Hagler landed 291. Leonard was more accurate. Leonard landed 258 power punches, while Hagler landed 213. Leonard landed the cleaner hard shots. Hagler landed 78 jabs while Leonard landed 48, but Hagler's jab was less effective overall. Hagler grew frustrated as the fight progressed. He could feel Leonard stealing rounds in the final 30 seconds with bursts of activity. Hagler remembered his own words. The only difference between street fighting and boxing is a referee stopping you from killing someone. In a street fight, Hagler's pressure would have eventually broken Leonard. In a boxing match, the rules favored the man who could hit and not get hit. The split decision loss to Leonard was Hagler's worst nightmare realized. A robbery by the establishment. Judge Jojo Guerra scored the fight 118 to 110 for Leonard. This scorecard was widely ridiculed as absurd, yet it contributed to Hagler losing his title. Judge Lou Filippo scored it 115 to 113 for Hagler. Judge Dave Moretti scored it 115 to 113 for Leonard. Hagler felt betrayed. He said he felt in his heart that he was still the champion. He said he really hated the politics of boxing. The fear that the system would conspire to dethrone him had come true. Leonard's victory drove Hagler into permanent exile in Italy. He turned his back on the sport that had finally disrespected him for the last time. The legacy of Marvin Hagler is often reduced to knockout highlights, but deeper analysis reveals a fighter defined by the specific fears his greatest rivals created. Hagler was not a mindless destroyer. He was a genius who adapted his violence to meet specific threats. These 5 boxers served as architects of Hagler's greatness. Vito Antuofermo taught him that judges could not be trusted. This created his destruct and destroy philosophy. Roberto Duran taught him patience and respect for intelligence. He forced Hagler to prove he could box with a master. Thomas Hearns forced him to confront his own mortality. He extracted the most violent 8 minutes in sports through pure threat of annihilation. John Mugabe showed him the reflection of his fading youth. He demanded a final stand of pure will. Sugar Ray Leonard confirmed his lifelong suspicion of the establishment. He provided the tragic end to a career fueled by feeling like an outsider. Hagler's fear was never cowardice. It was high-octane fuel that drove him to run frozen beaches in combat boots. It was the voice that told him not to doubt him, because that is when he gets stronger. By understanding the specific dangers posed by Antuofermo, Duran, Hearns, Mugabe, and Leonard, Marvin Hagler transformed from a fighter into a legend. He may have eventually lost his title, but he never lost the terrifying aura that made him truly marvelous. If this video gave you a new perspective on one of boxing's greatest champions, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into boxing history. What other fighters should I analyze next? Let me know in the comments.
came with the right and stuck him with that jab before he went down. But even then, I thought he was going to get up. But once I seen him looking around for that mouthpiece, I knew he was hurt because, you were trained to, get up.
I was so proud of myself in that fight. That was my favorite, best fight ever. I always say that was my favorite fight because I didn't know how many punches I took and I wanted to fight and I saw myself picking up that mouthpiece and I was so proud.
Amazing.
I was proud of myself. I didn't know where I was.
He's the strongest man on the planet. That's what they said about Mike Tyson. But when Buster Douglas named his 3 toughest opponents, he didn't just talk about power. He talked about heart, discipline, and focus. 3 very different fighters, 3 very different battles. And the answers might surprise you. Let's start with the fight that changed everything. February 11th, 1990, Tokyo, Japan. Buster Douglas steps into the ring as a 42-1 underdog. Nobody thinks he can win, nobody except Douglas himself. Across from him stands Iron Mike Tyson, undefeated, undisputed, 37 wins, 0 losses, 33 knockouts. Tyson is considered the baddest man on the planet. He's the heavyweight champion of the world, and he looks unstoppable. But Douglas has something nobody can see on paper. 3 weeks before the fight, his mother died from a heart attack. Her name was Lula Pearl. Douglas promised her he would win this fight. That promise becomes his fuel. While Tyson parties in Tokyo and barely prepares, Douglas trains with quiet determination. He channels his grief into focus, and when the bell rings, something unexpected happens. Douglas doesn't run. He doesn't back down. He starts working his jab, not just a regular jab, a monster jab. He hangs it on Tyson's head like a frame. This disrupts Tyson's rhythm completely. Tyson likes to slip punches and get inside, but Douglas won't let him. Every time Tyson tries to move, that jab is there, waiting, controlling, creating distance. Douglas also uses something called a collar tie. He grabs Tyson's head and left arm. He steers him off balance. He forces Tyson to circle away from his power side. When other fighters pivot away from Tyson, they walk right into his hooks. But Douglas stands his ground. He smothers Tyson's attacks. He uses his elbow to stop Tyson's head movement. And when Tyson corners him, Douglas fires back in furious bursts. Round after round, Douglas executes a perfect game plan. He's 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. Tyson is 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. Douglas uses every inch of that advantage. He keeps Tyson at the end of his punches. He controls the ring geometry. He makes Tyson work for everything. Then comes the 8th round. Tyson lands a vicious uppercut. Douglas crashes to the canvas. The crowd gasps. Is this the end? Did Tyson just prove everyone right? But watch what happens next. Douglas is hurt, but he's listening to the count. He makes sure to get up at 9. He's aware. He's coherent. He beats the count and survives the round. Some people called it a long count. Don King tried to use it to overturn the result, but Douglas was clearly in control. He knew exactly what he was doing. He got up at the right time, and more importantly, he was ready to keep fighting. 2 rounds later, Douglas delivers the most famous punch in boxing history. He lands a vicious right hand, then a stunning combination. Tyson crashes to the canvas. He's on his knees. He's groping for his mouthpiece like a drunk man searching for his keys. The referee counts to 10, and just like that, the upset of the century is complete. Douglas wins by knockout in the 10th round. The aftermath is chaos. Don King immediately starts screaming about the long count from the 8th round. He demands the result be overturned. He wants the sanctioning bodies to withdraw recognition of Douglas as champion, but the bodies refuse. Why? Because Douglas was clearly coherent when he got up. He was listening to the count. He knew exactly what he was doing. Meanwhile, Tyson in the 10th round was completely gone. He couldn't find his mouthpiece. He couldn't get up. The difference was obvious. Douglas himself explained it perfectly in a later interview. When asked about the knockdown, he said this: if Tyson was coherent, he would have just got up. But Tyson wasn't coherent. He was broken. Long before that final punch landed, Tyson was already defeated mentally. Douglas had broken through the aura. He had proven the so-called baddest man on the planet was human after all. What made this victory even more remarkable was how unprepared Tyson was. While Douglas trained with purpose and grief as his fuel, Tyson did nothing to prepare. He spent weeks in Tokyo living wildly. He was depressed. He had a revolving door of visitors in his hotel room. 19 days before the fight, Tyson got knocked down heavily in sparring. His corner was shameful under pressure. When Tyson's eye started swelling during the fight, they famously used a condom filled with ice to treat it. That's not the preparation of a champion. That's the preparation of someone who thinks he can't lose. But Douglas proved him wrong, and in doing so, Douglas showed what happens when talent meets preparation meets motivation. For one perfect night, everything aligned. That's the Douglas the world remembers. That's the fighter who changed boxing history forever. But here's what makes this fight so important to Douglas. It wasn't just about beating Tyson. It was about proving something to himself. Tyson tested his heart. Could Douglas take a punch and get back up? Could he stay composed under pressure? Could he finish the job when his body wanted to quit? The answer was yes. That night in Tokyo, Douglas showed more heart than anyone thought possible. Tyson forced him to dig deeper than ever before. That's why Tyson belongs on this list. 8 months later, Douglas faces his second toughest opponent. October 25th, 1990, Las Vegas, Nevada. Douglas is now the heavyweight champion of the world. He has all three major belts, the WBA, the WBC, the IBF. He's living his childhood dream, and he's getting paid $24 million to defend those belts against Evander Holyfield. But something has changed. After beating Tyson, Douglas found himself at the top of the boxing world. He enjoyed his success. He enjoyed it a little too much. He spent months stuffing himself with food. He stopped training with the same intensity. When he steps on the scale for the Holyfield fight, he weighs 246 pounds. That's 14.5 pounds heavier than he was for Tyson. Holyfield takes the exact opposite approach. He trains like a Spartan warrior. He's in superb condition. He prepares as if he's fighting a reincarnation of Joe Louis, not the flabby champion standing across from him. Holyfield doesn't care about Douglas's reputation. He doesn't care about the Tyson upset. He just trains and trains and trains. The fight starts and Douglas looks sluggish. He's plodding. He's slow. Holyfield dominates from the opening bell. He's faster. He's sharper. He's everywhere Douglas isn't. The end comes quickly. In the third round, Douglas telegraphs a slow-motion uppercut. It's predictable. It's lazy. Holyfield sees it coming from a mile away. He feints to draw out the punch. Douglas overcommits. And Holyfield steps back with a perfect right cross. It's a technical masterpiece. The punch lands clean. Douglas flops. He goes down flat on his back. He lies there motionless and disoriented. Unlike in Tokyo, he makes no attempt to beat the count. The referee counts to 10. Douglas's 257-day reign as champion is over. This wasn't a lucky punch from Holyfield. This was a calculated counter. Holyfield studied Douglas. He knew Douglas would throw that uppercut. He baited him into it. And when Douglas took the bait, Holyfield was ready. It was a perfect example of preparation beating talent. Holyfield didn't just train his body, he trained his mind. He knew what Douglas would do before Douglas did it. The contrast between the two fighters that night was staggering. Douglas looked like a man who thought he had already won. Holyfield looked like a man who knew the real fight was just beginning. Douglas had spent months celebrating his Tyson victory. Holyfield had spent months preparing for his moment. When they met in the ring, only one of them was ready for war. Douglas retired immediately after this fight. He couldn't face what had happened. He had reached the top of the mountain and then fallen off in just 8 months. The shame of it crushed him. For years, he couldn't talk about it without feeling the weight of his own failure. This loss haunts Douglas. Years later, when he talks about his top 3 fights, he mentions coming back and winning a title. He's not talking about this fight. He's talking about a minor comeback in 1998 where he won a small belt just to redeem himself for this moment. That's how much the Holyfield loss hurt. So why is Holyfield on this list? Because he exposed the truth about discipline. Holyfield didn't beat Douglas with power. He beat him with preparation. He made Douglas pay for every mistake, every lazy punch, every moment of sloppiness. Holyfield showed that talent isn't enough. You need discipline, you need focus, you need to respect your opponent. Douglas learned that lesson the hard way, and it's a lesson he never forgot. But to understand both the Tyson victory and the Holyfield defeat, we need to go back 3 years earlier. May 30th, 1987, Las Vegas, Nevada. Douglas faces Tony Tucker for the vacant IBF heavyweight title. This fight is the key to understanding everything. Tony Tucker is not a household name today, but in 1987, he's an elite fighter. He comes into this fight undefeated, 34 wins, 0 losses, 29 knockouts. He's 6'5", he has excellent skills, and he's about to prove just how good he really is. The fight starts, and Douglas looks great. He's using his jab effectively. He's landing combinations. He's moving well. After 9 rounds, the fight is incredibly close. One judge has Douglas ahead 86-85. Another judge has Tucker ahead 86-85. The third judge has it even at 86-86. Douglas is in position to win his first major title. Then something happens in the 10th round. Douglas fades. His focus slips. His energy drops. Tucker senses the shift. He starts landing his long jab. He puts Douglas on the ropes. He unloads a barrage of punches. The referee stops the fight. Tucker wins by technical knockout. This loss defines Douglas's reputation for years. People say he quits. They say he's talented but lazy. They say he has a lackadaisical approach. His father, Billy Douglas, is furious. Not just because his son lost, but because his son had the skills to win and didn't use them. But here's what people forget about Tony Tucker. He wasn't just some random opponent. After beating Douglas, Tucker went straight into a unification bout with Mike Tyson. This was August 1st, 1987, just 2 months after the Douglas fight, and Tucker gave Tyson the hardest fight of his entire 1980s run. Tucker became the first man to take Tyson the full 12-round distance. He didn't just survive, he competed. He made Tyson work for every second of every round. Think about what that means. Douglas was beating Tucker on the scorecards after 9 rounds. Douglas had the skills to compete with a man who would push prime Tyson to the limit. That's not a weak performance, that's elite-level boxing. The tragedy wasn't that Douglas lacked talent. The tragedy was that he couldn't maintain it for 3 more rounds. 6 years later, Tucker proved his quality again. In 1993, he faced Lennox Lewis. Lewis was in his prime. He was younger. He was faster. He was the future of the division. But Tucker, now past his best years, still gave Lewis a war. Another 12-round distance fight. Another performance that showed Tucker belonged among the elite. This context makes the 1987 loss even more painful for Douglas. He didn't lose to a nobody. He lost to a legitimate top-tier heavyweight, but he lost because his mind wandered, because his focus broke, because when the moment came to take over and finish the fight, he couldn't do it. Tucker didn't have more talent than Douglas. He had more mental strength. And in boxing, that's often the difference between winning and losing. Tucker goes on to prove he's the real deal. He gives prime Mike Tyson his hardest fight of the 1980s. He becomes the first man to take Tyson the full 12-round distance. Years later, he gives prime Lennox Lewis a war. Tucker is underrated, but he's elite, and he beat a very good version of Douglas. So why is Tucker on this list? Because he tested Douglas's focus. Could Douglas stay locked in for 12 full rounds? Could he finish a fight when he was winning? Could he push through when things got hard? Against Tucker, the answer was no. Douglas had the skills. He had the tools, but he couldn't maintain his concentration. Tucker punished him for that, and that loss became the ghost that haunted Douglas for 3 years. Now let's bring this all together. 3 fighters, 3 very different challenges. Mike Tyson tested Douglas's heart. Could he survive the most dangerous puncher in the world? Could he get up from a knockdown? Could he finish the fight when everything was on the line? Evander Holyfield tested Douglas's discipline. Could he train properly when he was already a champion? Could he respect his opponent? Could he avoid the traps of success? Tony Tucker tested Douglas's focus. Could he stay mentally sharp for 12 rounds? Could he close the show when he was winning? Could he overcome his own weaknesses? Each fighter revealed a different truth about Douglas. With Tyson, Douglas was perfect. He was motivated by his mother's death, he was prepared, he was focused, he executed his game plan flawlessly, and he showed incredible heart by getting up in the 8th round. That version of Douglas was unstoppable. With Holyfield, Douglas failed completely. He let success make him lazy, he showed up out of shape, he paid the price. Holyfield didn't just beat Douglas, he embarrassed him, and that embarrassment taught Douglas a lesson about discipline he would never forget. With Tucker, Douglas showed both his potential and his weakness. He proved he could compete with elite fighters, but he also proved he couldn't always finish what he started. Tucker exposed the mental gap between being good and being great. Here's the interesting part. When Douglas was asked to name his top 3 fights in a live Life by Design interview, he didn't name Tyson, Holyfield, or Tucker. Instead, he named 3 moments. Winning the heavyweight championship, the fight right before winning the championship, and coming back to win a title years later. He didn't focus on the opponents. He focused on what those moments meant to him personally. That tells you everything you need to know about Buster Douglas. For him, the toughest opponent was never the man across the ring. It was always himself, his own discipline, his own focus, his own heart. Tyson, Holyfield, and Tucker just happened to be the fighters who forced him to confront those battles. Against Tyson, Douglas conquered himself. He became the fighter he always could have been. Against Tucker and Holyfield, Douglas lost to himself. He showed the weaknesses that had always held him back. That's why these 3 fighters matter, not because of who they were, but because of what they revealed about Douglas. The Tokyo version of Douglas was almost mythical. He was perfect for one night. He had the skills, the focus, the discipline, and the heart all working together. That's the Douglas who shocked the world. But the Douglas who lost to Tucker and Holyfield was the real Douglas. Talented beyond measure, but undermined by his own nature. In the end, Buster Douglas's 3 toughest opponents taught him 3 lessons. Tyson taught him about heart. Holyfield taught him about discipline. Tucker taught him about focus. And together they defined not just his career, but his entire life. Because the toughest boxer Buster Douglas ever fought wasn't in the ring. It was the one he faced in the mirror every single day. He's the best ever. That's what the world called Muhammad Ali. But even the greatest fighter who ever lived had to face men who pushed him to his absolute limit. 3 men tested Ali in ways no one else could. 3 men who made him dig deeper than he ever thought possible. These weren't just opponents. They were the mountains Ali had to climb to prove he really was the greatest. Joe Frazier was the first mountain, a relentless warrior with a left hook like a sledgehammer. Ali called their third fight, the Thrilla in Manila, the closest thing to dying he ever felt. That wasn't just talk. That was truth spoken from a place of pure exhaustion and pain. Their rivalry started years earlier in 1971. Ali had been away from boxing for 3.5 years. He refused to fight in Vietnam. He gave up his prime years standing on principle. When he came back, Joe Frazier was waiting. Frazier was the champion now, undefeated, powerful, hungry to prove he was the real king. They called it the fight of the century. The whole world watched. Ali danced and moved like always, but Frazier kept coming. He never stopped. He walked through punches that would drop other men. He absorbed pain like it was nothing. Ali described Frazier as being like a machine that couldn't be shut off. In the 15th round, Frazier landed his famous left hook. Ali went down. It was one of boxing's most iconic moments. The man who floated like a butterfly was on the canvas. Frazier won that night. He handed Ali his first professional loss, but that was just the beginning of their war. They fought again in 1974. Ali won that time by decision. It was tactical, less brutal than their first meeting, but it set the stage for something even more savage. October 1975, Manila, Philippines. The heat was unbearable. The ring felt like an oven. What happened that day went beyond boxing. It became a test of human endurance itself. Both men battered each other for 14 rounds. Ali landed combinations that would have finished anyone else. Frazier kept walking forward, throwing hooks that thudded into Ali's body and head. The crowd watched 2 warriors destroy each other round by round. After the 14th round, Ali slumped in his corner. He told his trainer Angelo Dundee to cut his gloves off. He was ready to quit. His body had nothing left. Across the ring, Frazier's trainer Eddie Futch was stopping the fight too. Frazier was half blind from swelling. His face was a mess of bruises and cuts. Ali won because Frazier couldn't answer the bell for the 15th round. But Ali later admitted something stunning. Frazier quit just before he did. Ali didn't think he could fight anymore either. Both men reached their absolute limit at the exact same moment. The brutality of Manila came from more than just punches. It came from hatred. Ali had said cruel things about Frazier during their rivalry. He called him ugly. He called him a gorilla. He dismissed him as an Uncle Tom. These insults cut deep because Frazier had actually helped Ali. He'd even lent Ali money during his exile. Frazier felt betrayed. The anger fueled him. It made him fight with a fury that was almost supernatural. In Manila, that rage nearly broke Ali completely. But something changed after Manila. The hatred cooled. Respect grew in its place. After Frazier died in 2011, Ali said the world lost a great champion. He said he'd always remember Joe with respect and admiration. Maybe Ali's best words about Frazier came years earlier. He apologized for making Frazier angry. Then he said if God ever called him to a holy war, he'd want Joe Frazier fighting beside him. That was the ultimate praise. The man who nearly killed him in the ring was the man he'd want next to him in any battle. Joe Frazier tested Ali's will. He made Ali discover courage he didn't know he had. Frazier pushed him to the edge of death and made him look into that darkness. That's what made Frazier one of Ali's 3 toughest opponents. The Frazier rivalry showed boxing at its most primal. 2 men who genuinely disliked each other fighting with everything they had, not for money or glory alone, but to prove something deeper. Frazier wanted to prove he deserved respect. Ali wanted to prove he was still the greatest despite the years he'd lost. What made their battles so memorable was how evenly matched they were. Frazier won 1, Ali won 2. But all 3 fights were wars. All 3 fights pushed both men to places most athletes never have to go. The pain they inflicted on each other was legendary. The damage lasted for years after the final bell. Frazier's style was perfectly built to challenge Ali. That constant forward pressure, those devastating body shots, that left hook that came from nowhere and landed like a cannonball. Frazier was willing to take 3 punches to land one, and when his 1 punch landed, it changed the entire fight. Ken Norton was different. Norton was a puzzle Ali never truly solved. The proof comes from Ali's own mouth. He said Kenny's style was too difficult for him. He said he couldn't beat Norton and didn't want to fight him again. Coming from a man who called himself the greatest, this admission was shocking. Norton was Ali's kryptonite, the one fighter whose style just didn't make sense to Ali, no matter how hard he tried to figure it out. Norton was a former Marine, relatively unknown when they first met in 1973, but that night, Norton did something unforgettable. He broke Ali's jaw. Ali, being incredibly tough, finished all 12 rounds despite the injury, but he lost a split decision. Norton won because of how he fought. He wasn't a brawler like Frazier. He wasn't a monster like Foreman. He was a technical puzzle. Norton had a herky-jerky style. He jabbed from below. He crossed his hands for defense in unusual ways. Nothing about his movement was standard. This strange style came from brilliant planning. Norton's trainer was Eddie Futch, the same man who trained Frazier. Futch was a genius at finding tiny flaws in Ali's technique. For Norton, Futch built a master plan. Futch knew Ali was proud of his jab. He also knew Ali wasn't great at parrying jabs coming back at him. So Futch told Norton to out-jab Ali, beat him at his own game, play mind games games with him by taking away his best weapon. It worked perfectly. Norton outlanded Ali by a huge margin. The strategy neutralized everything Ali did best. Ali and Norton fought 3 times total, 39 rounds. Ali won the second and third fights both by decision, but he never looked dominant, not once. The decisions were controversial, especially the third fight. Their final meeting was at Yankee Stadium in 1976. Most people watching thought Norton won. The crowd booed loudly when they announced Ali as the winner. Looking at the punch statistics later, Norton landed way more punches. Many experts still call it a robbery. The Norton trilogy showed something important about Ali's greatness. 2 years earlier in 1974, Ali had pulled off an impossible victory against George Foreman. Everyone considers that his career peak, his moment of genius. Yet 2 years later, he faced Norton and still couldn't find a solution to that awkward style. This proves Norton's technique was actually harder for Ali than Foreman's power. Power could be outsmarted with a brilliant plan, but Norton's weird mechanics were a riddle Ali never fully answered. Even in his prime as champion, Norton remained a mystery. That's why Norton belongs on the list. He tested Ali's technique and adaptability in ways no one else did. He exposed limitations that Ali himself admitted he couldn't overcome. Norton's broken jaw victory became legendary in boxing history. The image of Ali fighting 12 rounds with a fractured jaw showed his toughness, but it also showed Norton's ability to inflict damage that other fighters couldn't. The injury was severe. It required surgery. It changed how Ali approached their next 2 fights. What made Norton so frustrating for Ali was the unpredictability. You could prepare for Frazier's pressure. You could plan for Foreman's power. But Norton's awkward angles and strange timing were impossible to prepare for fully. Every round felt like solving a new puzzle, and Ali never quite found all the answers. George Foreman was the third mountain. He represented a different kind of challenge. He was the most terrifying opponent Ali ever faced. Foreman wasn't just strong. He was a freak of nature with ungodly power. A young, fierce wrecking ball who seemed invincible. The rumble in the jungle in 1974 was Ali's greatest strategic test. The whole world was scared for Ali's health. People genuinely thought Foreman might kill him. This wasn't exaggeration. It was based on what Foreman had done to Ali's other rivals. Foreman had destroyed Joe Frazier, knocked him down 6 times in just 2 rounds. Then he knocked out Ken Norton in 2 rounds. The message was crystal clear. Foreman was better than Frazier and better than Norton. Since Frazier had beaten Ali, the math seemed simple. Foreman would destroy Ali too. There was no logical reason to believe Ali could win. Foreman was younger, stronger, undefeated. His punches felt like getting hit with a sledgehammer. He was a bulldozer, a monster. The public was genuinely terrified Ali would get seriously hurt. Ali's response to this fear was fascinating. He didn't downplay Foreman's power. Instead, he built up his own mythology even bigger. His pre-fight poetry became legendary. He said he'd wrestled with alligators and tussled with a whale. He said he'd handcuffed lightning and thrown thunder in jail. He said he was so mean he made medicine sick. Then he'd pause and say, "Wait till you see Muhammad Ali." The words were part confidence and part self-hypnosis. He was battling the idea of Foreman before he even stepped in the ring. Ali openly acknowledged how hard Foreman hit. He talked about how Foreman destroyed Frazier. By admitting Foreman's power, Ali made his own claims seem even more dramatic. He was building a myth big enough to match the monster. What happened in Zaire became boxing legend, the rope-a-dope strategy. But it wasn't what people think. It wasn't a dope on the ropes getting beaten up. It was an active, intelligent plan born of necessity. Ali was 32 years old. He couldn't dance for 15 rounds against a younger, stronger man. His legs weren't what they used to be, so he used the ropes to absorb Foreman's power. He let the ring ropes take some of the impact. He leaned back and made Foreman reach, which tired him out faster. But Ali did more than just survive. He held Foreman's arms down in the clinch. He talked trash in Foreman's ear. He used his superior conditioning to take Foreman into deep water. Foreman had never been past 8 rounds. Ali made sure he got there. The turning point came in round 7. Foreman hit Ali with a punch that should have ended it. A punch that would have knocked out anyone else. Ali just held him close and whispered, "That all you got, George?" At that moment, the myth of the invincible monster shattered. By round 8, Foreman was exhausted. Ali came off the ropes and knocked him out. The impossible had happened. Ali proved his intelligence and heart were bigger than Foreman's brute force. Unlike the bitter feud with Frazier, Ali and Foreman eventually became close friends. Foreman, who once thought Ali was just another victim, became his greatest admirer. Foreman said Ali was the greatest man, not just the greatest boxer. He said calling Ali the greatest boxer was actually putting him down, because Ali was bigger than boxing. He was bigger than anything. The Foreman fight only lasted 8 rounds. It wasn't as physically brutal as the 14 rounds in Manila, but it belongs on the list of toughest opponents for a specific reason. Foreman represented the combined problem of Frazier and Norton, amplified. He'd solved both of them easily. He'd knocked them both out in 2 rounds. Ali's victory in Zaire was a grand strategic checkmate. He proved his brain could defeat the strongest force of nature in boxing. He showed that intelligence and courage could overcome power that seemed unstoppable. These 3 men shared something important. They all had connections to trainer Eddie Futch. Futch was the man who solved Ali. He trained 4 of the 5 men who ever defeated Muhammad Ali. His 2 greatest works of art were Joe Frazier and Ken Norton. For Frazier, Futch Futch spotted a tiny flaw. He noticed Ali carried his right hand too wide. He saw Ali had a tendency to loop his right hand low when throwing an uppercut. Futch told Frazier to throw his devastating left hook over that uppercut. This exact move caused the knockdown in the fight of the century. For Norton, Futch used a completely different approach. It was psychological. He knew Ali was proud of his jab, so Futch's master plan was to have Norton out-jab Ali. This played mind games with Ali. It neutralized his greatest weapon and provided the foundation for Norton's unusual but effective style. Think about this. In 80 rounds during Ali's prime, he was essentially fighting the same strategic mind. 41 rounds against Frazier, 39 rounds against Norton. Ali spent 10 years in a chess match against a single mastermind who had custom-built two different Ali beaters. The fact that Ali won most of those fights shows his adaptability and greatness. He was fighting not just the men in front of him, but the brilliant strategy behind them. Other fighters gave Ali trouble. Sonny Liston was the man Ali shocked in 1964. Ali was an 8-to-1 underdog. The victory shook up the world, but Liston was past his prime. The rivalry is covered in controversy. The second fight ended with a phantom punch nobody really saw land. Oscar Bonavena gave Ali a brutal test in 1970. Ali even said at the time it was the toughest fight he'd ever had. Bonavena hit him with hooks harder than Frazier could throw. It was a necessary test that proved Ali could still take punishment, but it was a prelude to the Frazier Wars, not the war itself. Doug Jones gave the young Cassius Clay trouble in 1963. He rocked Clay and made him look like a novice, but it was an early scare, not a career-defining battle. Larry Holmes beat Ali in 1980, but that fight was a tragedy, not a contest. Ali was shot. His skills were gone. Holmes was so dominant he actually begged the referee to stop it. That fight measures Ali's heartbreaking decline, not Holmes's toughness against a prime Ali. The three toughest opponents were Frazier, Norton, and Foreman. Each represented a unique supreme challenge. Each tested a different essential part of Ali's greatness. Joe Frazier tested his will and endurance. Frazier pushed Ali to the absolute edge of death. He forced Ali to find courage he never knew existed inside him. Manila was a spiritual and moral reckoning as much as a physical one. Ken Norton tested his technique and adaptability. Norton was the riddle Ali admitted he couldn't solve. The style that remained kryptonite even when Ali was champion. The awkward mechanics that exposed limitations Ali himself acknowledged. George Foreman tested his intellect and courage. Foreman was the terrifying force who had crushed Ali's other rivals. He forced Ali to invent a strategy that defined genius. He made Ali prove that brains could beat brawn. These three men didn't just fight Ali, they revealed him. They forced him to discover three different versions of his own greatness. In defeating them or surviving them, Ali showed the world what being the greatest really meant. The story of Ali's toughest opponents is really the story of Ali himself. It's about will discovered through suffering, technique tested by confusion, intelligence proven through fear. These three fighters didn't diminish Ali's legacy, they created it. Looking back at Ali's career, you see a man who faced every possible challenge boxing could offer. Physical warriors who wanted to break his body, technical masters who wanted to outsmart him, powerful punchers who wanted to destroy him. He faced them all, and through those battles he became something more than just a fighter. Ali called himself the greatest, but it was these three men who helped make him that.
I was confident that I had a turn, and as long as I was still alive, that I knew that my turn would come, that I would have a chance to see exactly what I was able to do in the boxing ring, and if I was going to grow or, or anything like that. But I knew it would take time. Leon was a fast learner. Leon learned fast in St. Louis. It took me a long time to really learn how to,
Michael Spinks names his 6 toughest boxers. Not the most famous, not the biggest names, the ones who felt most dangerous inside the ring. Before we get to that list, you need to understand who Michael Spinks really was. He won Olympic gold in 1976. He became the undisputed light heavyweight champion. Then he did something no one had ever done before. He moved up and beat an undefeated heavyweight champion. Larry Holmes had 48 wins and 0 losses. Spinks took his title anyway, but most people only remember 91 seconds. That's how long it took Mike Tyson to knock him out. One fight erased everything else in people's minds. That's not fair to Spinks. He beat some of the greatest fighters who ever lived. His list of toughest opponents isn't about fame. It's about the men who pushed him hardest, the ones who made him earn every single victory. Some he beat, one he didn't, but all of them left a mark that lasted forever. Spinks was called Jinx because of how he moved in the ring. His style was awkward and hard to figure out. He'd lean back, throw punches from strange angles, and make champions look confused. That style took him to the very top of the sport. He stood on the Olympic podium in Montreal alongside his brother Leon. They were the first brothers ever to win both Olympic gold and professional world titles. That moment was just the beginning of an incredible journey. His professional record tells an amazing story. 31 wins and only 1 loss, 21 knockouts. He never lost a fight until he faced Tyson. It's an entire career without tasting defeat. Very few fighters in history can say that. The light heavyweight division in the early 1980s was loaded with talent. Historians call it the greatest era that weight class ever saw. Spinks didn't just compete in that era, he dominated it. He beat every top fighter they put in front of him. Let's start with the scariest name on the list. Mike Tyson tops every category Spinks ever talked about. Biggest puncher, fastest hands, strongest fighter. When Spinks spoke about Tyson, he didn't hold anything back. He said Tyson had power and hand speed that was hard to beat. That combination made him nearly impossible to solve. Their fight was supposed to settle everything. Tyson had all 3 major belts. Spinks was the lineal champion. The fight made $70 million. It was the richest fight in boxing history at that time. Everyone wanted to know who was really the best. Spinks earned $13.5 million for that fight. It was more than all his previous fights combined. The world was watching. The pressure was enormous. 2 undefeated champions were about to collide. The build-up to the fight was intense. Tyson was destroying everyone in his path. He looked like an unstoppable machine. Spinks was the thinking man's fighter. People wondered if intelligence could beat raw power. Spinks didn't last 2 minutes. Tyson knocked him out in 91 seconds. But what Spinks said about that knockout tells you everything about Tyson's power. He said the punch didn't even hurt. It felt like a slap, but it numbed his entire body. It paralyzed him. His nervous system just shut down. That's not normal punching power. Pain you can fight through. Spinks had been hurt before, but Tyson's punch went past pain. It turned off his body like a light switch. Spinks said he couldn't continue. He was paralyzed. His body stopped working. Tyson was thick as a tree but moved like a smaller man. He knew how to slide in real fast. He'd get close and land punches before you could react. The speed and power together made him impossible to handle. Spinks never hesitated when asked who hit hardest. He said Mike Tyson was definitely the biggest puncher he ever fought. This was the one fight Spinks couldn't get through. He said those exact words. Tyson was the force he couldn't solve. But Spinks showed up. He took the risk. He faced the monster when most fighters would have walked away. Years later, people still talk about that fight. Some even accuse Spinks of not trying. That's how fast it ended. But Spinks defended himself with honesty. He said Tyson simply had his number that night. The punch landed in the right spot and shut everything down. Now let's talk about a man Spinks beat twice but never stopped respecting. Larry Holmes was one of the smartest fighters who ever lived. Spinks beat him in 1985. Then he beat him again in 1986. But he never claimed he was better than Holmes. He just said he figured out how to win. Holmes was so well prepared for everything. His jab was one of the best weapons in heavyweight history. His defense was tight. You couldn't land clean shots on him easily. Spinks knew this going into their first fight. He was a huge underdog. Holmes had 48 wins and no losses. He was 1 win away from matching Rocky Marciano's record. The pressure on Holmes was massive. The whole world was watching to see if he could match Marciano. That pressure might have affected him, but Spinks wasn't thinking about history. He was thinking about winning. Spinks gained 25 pounds to move up and fight him. Nobody thought he had a chance. The bookmakers had him at 6-1, but Spinks had a plan. He used his awkward style to confuse Holmes. His herky-jerky movements threw off Holmes's timing. Spinks won a decision after 15 rounds. What beat Holmes wasn't strength. Spinks said it himself. What beat Larry was his experience and know-how. All those amateur fights came in handy. Spinks had learned so much over the years that he could solve puzzles other fighters couldn't. He made Holmes respect him in the ring. Spinks said he did so much to Larry during the fight that he earned that respect. It wasn't about being bigger or stronger. It was about being smarter and more experienced. The rematch was even closer. Most people thought Holmes won the second fight. The Associated Press scored it for Holmes. HBO's score gave it to Holmes. A poll of 46 sports writers had 42 of them scoring it for Holmes. But the judges gave it to Spinks by a split decision. Holmes was furious. He told the judges and promoters to kiss him where the sun doesn't shine. But Spinks had done it again. He'd figured out the puzzle just barely. Over 30 rounds total, he'd beaten one of the greatest heavyweights ever. The toughness of Holmes wasn't about power. It was about his preparation and his skill. He was the ultimate puzzle, and Spinks solved him twice. That achievement alone would make most fighters legendary. But for Spinks, it was just part of an incredible run. Holmes had beaten everyone before Spinks came along. He'd defended his title 20 times. He'd beaten fighters like Ken Norton, Ernie Shavers, and Jerry Cooney. Everyone expected him to roll right through Spinks. But intelligence beat size that night. The fights between Spinks and Holmes showed what boxing is really about. It's not always about the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes the smartest fighter wins. Spinks proved that twice against one of the all-time greats. Next up is a man most people have never heard of, but Spinks knew exactly how tough he was. Dwight Muhammad Qawi used to be called Dwight Braxton. He was short and stocky, just 5 feet 7 inches tall. He was trained by Joe Frazier. He fought like a buzzsaw. He never stopped coming forward. His defense was tight. He was very hard to hit clean. But Spinks had a secret advantage. They used to be sparring partners. They boxed together every day. Spinks knew Qawi's style inside and out. He felt like he raised Qawi in the ring. Qawi said something interesting before their fight. He told Spinks he'd like to fight him for a lot of money, but he never said he wanted to win. Spinks went into that fight believing Qawi had already given up mentally. He thought Qawi knew he couldn't win. The fight was for all the light heavyweight belts. It was 15 rounds in Atlantic City. This was the fight that would make Spinks the undisputed champion. Everything was on the line. Spinks started with a swooping left hook that missed and a right hand that landed. That set the tone for the whole fight. Qawi respected that punch for all 15 rounds. Spinks won a clear decision. Qawi complained afterward that Spinks ran like a thief, but even Qawi admitted later that Spinks was the smartest opponent he ever faced. He said Spinks ran like a dog but was smart for doing so. The toughness of Qawi was in his pressure. For 15 full rounds, Spinks couldn't make a single mistake. Qawi was relentless. He forced Spinks to stay disciplined and execute his plan perfectly. That's a different kind of tough. It's mental. It's about staying sharp for 45 minutes straight. Qawi never gave up trying to land that one big shot. Every round felt dangerous. Spinks had to be perfect with his movement and timing. One slip and Qawi would have been all over him. Fighting someone you trained with is strange. You know their moves, but they know yours too. Qawi understood how Spinks thought. He knew the patterns. That made the mental battle even harder. Spinks had to stay one step ahead of a man who knew him extremely well. Now let's talk about a fighter who proved that even champions can get hurt. Eddie Davis doesn't belong on this list if you just look at the scorecards. Spinks beat him easily. Two judges had it 119 to 109 and 118 to 111. One weird card was closer at 115 to 114, but the final result was never in doubt. So why does Spinks list him as one of his toughest opponents? Because Davis hurt him. Spinks said it clearly. Eddie Davis was really ready. He hurt me. It was a tough fight. Spinks' brother Leon had fought against the Davis family in the amateurs. Leon warned Michael that Eddie was better and stronger. He was right. Davis came prepared. He landed shots that got through Spinks' defense. This is what makes the list honest. Spinks wasn't picking the most famous names. He was remembering the moments that scared him. Even in a fight he won by a wide margin, there was a moment where Davis breached his defenses. That moment stuck with him forever. Davis was a hard hitter. He brought real danger into the ring that night. Spinks survived it and won. But he never forgot what it felt like to be hurt by a man who was truly ready to take his title. That's the kind of honesty that defines this whole list. Spinks remembered the danger, not just the outcome. He gave credit to a fighter most people forgot about. That shows real character and respect for the sport. Let's go way back now. Back to Spinks' second professional fight. Luis Rodriguez was a journeyman. His record was 6 wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw. On paper, he had no business being on this list. Spinks had just turned pro after winning Olympic gold. He knocked out his first opponent in 1 round. Rodriguez was supposed to be an easy step up, but Rodriguez wouldn't quit. Spinks remembered him decades later for one reason. No matter how much Spinks hit him, Rodriguez kept coming back just as strong. He was one of those guys who would never quit. The fight went 6 rounds. Spinks won on all 3 cards. But it was a slugfest. Rodriguez forced Spinks to work for every second. He didn't fold. He didn't break. He just kept coming forward with the same strength he had in round 1. This was Spinks' second pro fight ever. He'd won Olympic gold 3 months earlier. He expected professional opponents to fall like amateur opponents did. Rodriguez taught him something different. He taught him about the grind of professional boxing. In the amateurs, you can win on points by being sharper. In the pros, you have to break men who refuse to be broken. Rodriguez refused. He made Spinks go the distance and earn the decision. That lesson stuck with Spinks for his entire career. The toughness Rodriguez brought wasn't about skill. It was about heart. It was about durability. It was about testing whether this young Olympic champion had what it took to be a professional. Spinks passed the test, but he never forgot how hard Rodriguez made him work. That fight happened in St. Louis, his hometown. The crowd expected an easy win. Instead, they watched a real war. Rodriguez had the best chin Spinks ever saw. Spinks said Rodriguez would never quit. He kept coming back just as strong. That kind of toughness is rare. Most fighters break when they get hit with big shots. Rodriguez just absorbed them and kept moving forward. Now we go back even further. Back to before Spinks turned pro. Back to the moment that changed everything. Rufat Riskiev was a Soviet fighter. In January 1976, a 19-year-old Spinks traveled to Tashkent, Russia for an amateur tournament. He faced Riskiev in a bout that would haunt him forever. Riskiev knocked him down with a straight right hand. Spinks had never been knocked down before in his life. He'd never tasted the canvas. He'd never felt his invincibility shatter like that. But the punch itself wasn't what made Riskiev so important. It was what Spinks learned from it. He said that knockdown lasted the rest of his life. He said he'd never underestimate anyone else again. That one punch created the fighter Spinks would become. It taught him fear. It taught him respect. It taught him that any fighter on any night could have the power to hurt him. That lesson turned him into a tactical master. It made him study opponents. It made him prepare. 6 months later, they fought again. This time it was the Olympic final in Montreal. Spinks didn't underestimate Riskiev this time. He adapted. He outboxed him. He stopped him with a body shot to win the gold medal. That revenge was perfect. It proved Spinks could learn from failure. It proved he could adapt and conquer the very man who knocked him down. But he never forgot the lesson. Years later, when he was a champion, he still listed Riskiev as one of the hardest punchers he ever faced, right there next to Mike Tyson. That's how deep the impact went. One punch in an amateur tournament in Russia taught Spinks everything he needed to know about respecting power. That knowledge carried him through an entire professional career. There's a couple of other names worth mentioning quickly. Eddie Davis, we already covered. Spinks also mentioned Rufat Riskiev as one of the hardest punchers alongside Tyson. Those two names came up when Spinks talked about pure punching power. So there you have it. 6 men who defined the career of Michael Spinks. Each one taught him something different about what tough really means. Riskiev taught him about respect. Rodriguez taught him about the grind. Qawi taught him about relentless pressure. Davis taught him about hidden danger. Holmes taught him about solving puzzles. And Tyson taught him about unstoppable force. Spinks went 31-0 before losing to Tyson. He beat Olympic champions. He beat Hall of Fame fighters. He beat an undefeated heavyweight champion twice. His light heavyweight reign came during the greatest era that division ever saw. He accomplished things no other fighter had ever done. Before Spinks, legends like Billy Conn, Archie Moore, and Bob Foster all tried to move up from light heavyweight and win the heavyweight title. Every single one of them failed. Spinks succeeded where legends couldn't. That's how special he was. That 91-second loss to Tyson doesn't erase any of that. It just proves how high Spinks was willing to climb. He took on the scariest fighter in the world when he didn't have to. He'd already made history. He was already rich. He fought Tyson because that's what champions do. His list of toughest opponents shows the mountains he climbed. These weren't easy fights. These were the men who tested him at every level. Some tested his chin. Some tested his heart. Some tested his mind. One was too much even for him. But Spinks faced them all. He beat almost all of them. And he never stopped giving credit where credit was due. That's what makes his legacy so strong. He wasn't just a great fighter. He was an honest one. Spinks always planned to retire after his first loss. After those 91 seconds with Tyson, he kept his word. He walked away from boxing with his head held high. He'd given everything to the sport. He'd climbed every mountain he could climb. One mountain was just too steep. But that doesn't change how high he got. The 6 men on this list represent different stages of Spinks' journey. From that first knockdown as a teenager to that final knockout as a champion, each man left something behind. They shaped how he thought. They changed how he prepared. They made him better. When you look at the full picture, Michael Spinks was one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. He dominated the light heavyweight division. He conquered the heavyweight division. He did things nobody thought possible. And through it all, he never forgot the men who made him work hardest. That's the mark of true greatness. Not just winning, but remembering everyone who pushed you along the way.